We have many challenges facing the world. The two most important now, I believe, are the food crisis caused by weather extremes from climate change, COVID challenges, and then now conflict, all those adding up together to a big food crisis. At the same time, we have a climate crisis, and the discussions that I've had are all around how do we tackle both? How do we address the food crisis so that everyone has enough to eat, but do it in a way that agriculture is also part of the solution to climate change? A lot of great discussions about how we help farmers transform agriculture to something we call regenerative agriculture. So taking the best practices, technologies, digital tools, and helping farmers grow better crops, so more productive land, but also at the same time take the agriculture towards zero carbon emissions. And we can do both by using the best tools in the world, the best products, the best digital tools, and helping farmers to make this happen. It's also really important that governments support farmers and companies to make this happen, because governments are very important with regulating products, the technologies that the farmers have, but also supporting the farmers and even the food companies to make sure that crops are grown productively, safely, and sustainably. The biggest challenge I see are governments not doing enough to step up to help farmers and companies to adopt modern tools in order to grow a good crop and to do it in a way that addresses climate change. And I'll give you an example. In Europe, the government's regulatory process is very difficult to get new seeds, new crop protection, new fertilizers approved that help farmers grow better crops and address climate change. Fortunately, in other countries, including China, the government is very committed to helping farmers grow a better crop and do it in a way that's sustainable for the climate. And I can tell you, in China, the best examples that I talk about to people, and they get really excited, are how the Chinese government is supporting Syngenta Group and other companies to develop these map centers, these modern agriculture platform centers across China. And there's now 560 map centers. And these map centers are fully equipped with the best product technologies, the best agronomists that help farmers learn how to farm with the best practices. And by doing this, the farmers grow better crops, higher quality, their soils are healthier, they're capturing carbon, they're reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and the food companies in China are very excited because they get high quality, high reliable food to serve consumers. And this is the most advanced development for helping transform agriculture that I see from all over the world happening in China today. I see fantastic potential from Chinese market and learning from the Chinese market for the rest of the world. And I'll give you an example. Last fall, in fall of 2021, the Syngenta Group launched, together with Dole and Disney, a new variety of tomatoes, a very sweet tomato and a very great tasting, adult tasting tomato called Yume, and the sweet tasting tomato called Nebula. They were launched in a package with Disney characters, so it's fun, healthy, great tasting snacks for the Chinese people, which, by the way, has been consumed in a great amount. The demand has been increasing tremendously. But also on the package is the map beside logo, which means high quality, sustainably grown, a QR code, which the Chinese consumers love to scan the QR code, and they see a picture of the farmer that grew the tomatoes, and they see the sustainability data. How much more green these tomatoes are grown. Less greenhouse gas emissions, higher productivity, so less land required, and less pesticides and fertilizer. This is the future of food for the world happening in China today. The reason this is so important is because it's an example, a real world example, not just a theory, of how you can go from the farmer all the way to the consumers and get consumers to pick healthy, sustainably grown products. And by doing that and connecting them all the way back to the farm will create demand for farmers to grow more sustainably grown food products. And that's going to catch on all over the world. First in China because of the digital advancements, but then that's going to follow in other parts of the world. I've had discussions with leading food companies like Nestle and Unilever, these big global food companies that are watching what's happening in China and saying they want to see that kind of development not only in China but around the world. And so we'll help food companies and farmers do that not only in China but elsewhere also, which by the way helps not only the health of people but the health of soil and both addressing food security and climate change. Food security has gone from something that agriculture companies like Syngenta Group talked about to where now everybody's talking about food security. Because if you don't have food security, nothing else matters. And you don't have food security also if you don't address climate change, because climate change causes more drought, more heat, more flooding, more winds that make farming more difficult. So what I'm learning here is that the world is starting to understand. Governments, NGOs, companies, the consumers are starting to understand that we have to attack both crises, food security and climate change, together by having more climate-friendly agriculture that also is there and producing enough food for everybody on the planet. The food crisis is very severe. The facts are that about 360 million people are nearing starvation today in the world. Many of them in Africa and the Middle East and some parts of Asia. That is going to get much worse, and it is getting worse because food prices are escalating dramatically. Food prices are up many places 40-50%. But today it's a cost issue that the governments, NGOs and others have to pay more to get food to the poorest people. What's coming is an availability issue. There's not going to be enough food for everybody unless farmers can grow more despite the climate change weather extremes, and we can help get grain out of Ukraine because there's a lot of grain stuck in Ukraine, and help Ukraine farmers make sure that they can grow a crop this year. Ukraine alone feeds 400 million people. And today, very little of that grain is getting out of Ukraine. So we have to help get the grain out of Ukraine. The World Food Program of the United Nations feeds 125 million of the poorest people in the world. They have a big problem now because 50% of their grain comes from the Ukraine. So that's feeding 70 million people per year. And the cost of food has gone up so much that they're struggling to be able to afford to buy enough food to feed the poorest of the poor. So they're making decisions about who in the world gets enough food to stop starvation. That is unacceptable. We need to transform agriculture to make sure there's food enough for everybody. And I love what's happening in China. Syngenta Group is in more than 100 countries, and we're helping to improve agriculture everywhere. But nowhere in the world is agriculture transforming as fast as it is in China. So in China, we're going to continue to help farmers there grow more food for the Chinese, but also learn and be an example for the rest of the world of how we can turn the food crisis into food security. Well, it depends on the conflict situation in Ukraine because so much grain is produced in Ukraine. And by the way, there's also a lot of fertilizer. 40% of the world's potash, which is a very important fertilizer, comes from Russia and Belarus. So we need to be able to get grain out of Ukraine and fertilizer out of Russia and Belarus for the world. If we can do that, we reduce the food crisis in the coming year. But I think it'll take 5 or 10 years for agriculture to transform where there's really solid food security for the world, but also where agriculture becomes net positive for the climate. My definition of sustainability in agriculture is that there is enough food for every person on planet Earth, and agriculture is net positive. Agriculture is taking CO2 from the air and putting it into plants and putting it into the soil so that there's net carbon positive from agriculture. This can be done. China will be a critically important player in making this happen, and Syngenta Group will be important in helping China make this happen, but also make it happen all around the world. My vision of the future of agriculture is that it's a very exciting place for young people to work, very dynamic with new technologies, improving seeds, improving biological products like vitamins for the plants, improving soil health, and exciting new healthy products that consumers want to consume because they're sustainably grown, they're healthy, they're better for the world, and they taste great and are fun to eat. Like our Yum tomatoes with the Disney characters. The crisis need is turning into a lot of energy and a lot of support financially from investors to invest in companies that are making this happen. It's also causing governments like China to invest more in new technologies. In fact, one of the most exciting new technologies is to advance seed breeding with something called gene editing. And more gene editing is happening in China than all the rest of the world. And that is going to start increasing in other parts of the world and help us to develop better seeds in China and for the world in a way that not only makes agriculture more sustainable, the farming, but also better, healthier, safer foods for consumers, and better tasting and more exciting. I have met with many young people that are in new companies, startups here in Davos, and I see them also in China. That's really exciting, creating things like plant-based meats that taste really great and are more sustainable for the planet. Healthier foods like our Yum tomato with a new taste, longer shelf life so there's less food waste, but at the same time that are exciting for consumers to consume. So we're seeing the young generation come to Syngenta Group and with startups, and I think that's wonderful to see. I think that's really important to ensure a sustainable future for the planet.
好的，非常感